Welcome everyone to Neverwinter on PC. My name is Vyerna and today I'm going to do a redo of the choosing a class/class mechanics video for MOD16. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you would like to see more information over this about Neverwinter, hit the subscribe button. As many of you might already know, I did a video about this in the past, but with MOD16 much has changed and the old video isn't fully correct anymore. Therefore I felt I needed to redo this video. Today I will once again mostly explain the roles of each class and their mechanics. I will not talk about specific builds or which class is the best for damage, healing or tanking. I will also not go very deep into details, so I'll keep it pretty simple and understandable for people who have never played the game. So don't expect full details, percentages and everything about every class mechanic. It's not gonna be a video like that. Statistics, boons and specific powers will also be something that are not in here. They will probably be covered in a different video altogether. This one will be all about the basics of the classes. The goal is to give new players insight in which class they should pick to play with. What fits them? Combat, in my opinion, still is really put well together in this game, and the class that you pick makes a big difference on how combat will pan out in the end. It would be a shame if you work your way all the way up to level 70 and in the end you don't like the playstyle or role that you have. This video should help prevent that from happening. There are 8 classes in Neverwinter, and we will cover all 8 of them today. I will try to demonstrate as much as possible about what I'm going to tell you, and if you're interested in a specific class, use the index in the description to jump to the class of your choosing. Each class has 2 so-called paragons, and each paragon makes a distinct choice on what your role will be in multiplayer content. A role of a paragon can be either healer, tank or damage dealer, also known as DPS. Most classes have different roles per paragon, but some also have 2 paragons with the same role. They are still different though, and I will explain what the difference is between the paragons in each class. Each class also has at least 2, but often more, class mechanics. You always have a shift mechanic, which you will be able to use as soon as you hold a main weapon, which will be a level 1. You can use this mechanic by pressing either the shift button or double tapping in a certain direction. So, like this, or using shift. You also always have a tap class mechanic, which will be unlocked at level 10. You use that one obviously by pressing the tab key. I will also mention any other important class mechanics if there are any. One last thing before we start. It's been a while now, so most people will know about this, but loadouts are in the game. These loadouts make it possible for your character to have multiple different setups on the same character. So I have a ranger here, and here you can see the loadouts. You can manage them and you can have multiple saved loadouts. You have 2 by default and you can buy additional ones. And you can easily switch loadouts here, and it will switch all your statistics and even your paragon when you do so. This way you can quickly change the role of your character to something else if needed, even inside a dungeon, as long as you are at a campfire. The first class we're going to take a look at is the Ranger class, and I'm already on this class. The Ranger class is mostly known for having not 3 encounter powers, but 6. They can swap 3 for 3 by swapping from melee to range stance, or back. Each one has their own cooldown, and because of this trait, Rangers can use a lot of encounter powers in combat. Depends on the build of course, but there's a possibility. There are two paragons for the ranger, and they're both DPS. You have the hunter paragon, which is a DPS paragon, as you can see, and the hunter mainly focuses on distant combat, so it's mainly ranged. And you also have the warden paragon, which is also a DPS paragon, and warden focuses more on close range combat. The ranger has a couple of class mechanics, and they are actually independent of paragon. Sometimes class mechanics are also dependent on paragon. The shift class mechanic is called shift. Shift basically moves you a small distance for a low amount of stamina, and you actually also are able to dodge attacks while you're shifting, or a little bit afterwards as well. Shifting will decrease your stamina, so you can shift a couple of times and then your stamina is low and you will not be able to shift anymore. Stamina required. But yeah, it will also slowly regenerate automatically when you're not using stamina. Then we get to the tab class mechanic, and this is actually what triggers the 6 encounter power story. The tab key enables you to switch from ranged, or actually from melee to ranged or back. So now I am in range stance, as you can see here, and I have these encounter powers and these at will powers as well. If I press the tab key, my encounter powers have changed, and also my at will powers have changed. And each of these powers has a different cooldown, which means you can use a lot of powers while the others are on cooldown. There is a third mechanic, which is called Grasping Roots. Grasping Roots holds enemies into place with the class feature Crushing Roots. Crushing Roots is, I think, here. This Grasping Roots also dazes your enemies. The rooting will only hold them in place, and the dazing will also make sure that they cannot attack you while you're standing next to them. This mechanic used to do a lot of damage as well in the past, but not anymore. So if I shoot someone, okay, did that. Let's see, can I hit someone without killing them outright? Here, now he's rooted. You can see the roots circles around someone. That's basically the ranger. And that was also a little demonstration of how the combat works. Of course, this is a little bit easy here because my character is quite strong. Combat actually very depends on your build. There are different builds with very different combat, where in one build you're only in range stance, or mostly you have a melee stance build, and you have also a combined build where you actually are really using the cooldowns from both stances. Anyway, that was the ranger. Let's go to the next one. Alright, the Barbarian. The Barbarian, previously known as the Great Weapon Fighter, is a frontline character that can either do a lot of damage or tank, depending on the chosen paragon. Right here I'm now on the Blade Master paragon, which is a DPS role, so you do a lot of damage on this role. And you also have the Sentinel paragon, which is a tank role. So in this role you want to be the one who's taking the beating. The Barbarian has different mechanics based on which paragon you're using. So let's start with the Blade Master. Blade Master has a shift mechanic called Sprint. Sprint basically makes you run very fast. You ignore, or you have reduced impact of speed reducing effects, and while sprinting you will quickly drain your stamina. So you will see it's going down very quick, and when your stamina is empty you will stop sprinting. That's basically sprint. Then your tab class mechanic. Tab class mechanic is called Battle Rage. Battle Rage is here, And there's a lot of text. What it basically does, you generate rage by attacking enemies, killing them, and also by taking damage. You see here your rage meter. When you are above 50% rage, you'll be able to press the tab key. 1 second. So here we go, we've more than, and then we turn berserk, we attack very quickly, we take decreased damage, and we also do more damage. And of course this mode switches off once your rage is down to 0. That's Battle Rage. That's basically what we have for the Blade Master. Then we get to the Sentinel. Let me go to the campfire real quick to swap. Let's run. As I said before, the Sentinel is a tank. The Sentinel has a completely different shift mechanic. The shift mechanic is one that's shared by all of the tank classes, and it's called block. Block raises your shields, and in this case your shield is your weapon because a tank or a Blade Master does not have a shield. And as you can see to the right here, we have a guard meter, and the guard meter represents basically your stamina, because you don't have stamina here, but this is your stamina, and your stamina represents your 50% of your health. When you get damage, the damage will first be subtracted from this guard meter. So let's go here. If this guy hits us, we will not lose HP here, the red part, but we will lose guard here. Also, typically, maybe some damage can go through, but mostly it will go off here. Also, in this mode, we are immune to most control effects. And another thing to mention is that stamina, unlike before, does not drain slowly automatically. It will only drain when you get hit. It will also not recharge though while you're in this mode. It will recharge once you let go of your stamina, and that's when you get more health again. So that's block. The Sentinel actually has a tab mechanic which is much like the Blade Master, and it's called Unstoppable. And Unstoppable is something that we saw before also on the Great Weapon Fighter. It does almost the same as Battle Rage, which is basically make you quicker to attack, do more damage, and take less damage. When you get hit, you also generate rage. The last class mechanic is a more passive one. It's called Will of the Sentinel, and this is also one that is shared by all of the tanks. And this class mechanic says that it increases threat, which means that you will attract enemies more, which is your job. As a tank, you want the enemies to attack you. You will also have more hit points, and one thing that's less good about this is your damage will be decreased, because you're a tank and you should not do a ton of damage, according to the developers. So, I also already showed you a little bit of combat. I guess that's enough. So let's go to the next class. The next class is the Cleric. Clerics are very good healers, but actually can also dish out a decent amount of damage depending on which Paragon path you choose. A Cleric uses a resource called Divinity to perform the stronger powers, called Encounter powers, So maintaining divinity is one of the big things a cleric has to watch out for. The paragons we have as a cleric is the devout, which is a healer role, and you also have the arbiter, and the arbiter is a DPS role. The mechanics of the cleric, the shift mechanic is basically the same as before. It's called dodge, and dodge moves you in a moderate amount of distance for a moderate amount of stamina. So this will again decrease your stamina when you use it, and stamina will slowly increase again. And this is the same for both paragons. The tab class mechanic is called Channel Divinity, and this is new for mod 16. This wasn't there before. Channel Divinity will slowly recharge your divinity meter, which can be seen here. This is your divinity, it's here at 1150, and divinity is used up by using encounter powers. As you can see, encounter powers can be spammed relatively quickly. They have low cooldowns, but they will use divinity. And when you press shift, you will start slowly regenerating this once again. What I like to do is actually tap it while walking, so you don't have to stand still for a long duration. So as I said, this is the same for both. Now we come to the different parts. We are on the devout. The devout has another mechanic, which is called righteousness. That basically makes you better at healing, generating less threat and doing more and better healing for less cost. The arbiter has a different class mechanic apart from shift and dodge. So shift and dodge are shift and tab are the same. And here we have something a little bit more complicated, which is called Scales of Judgment. Scales of Judgment means that your powers will cost more divinity, but now you will also have a Scales of Judgment meter. It's a judgment meter. And here's where things get a little bit more complicated. Your judgment has two types. You have Radiant and Burning. Radiant powers increase Burning judgment stacks, and fire powers increase Radiant judgment stacks. If you use a power of the type that you have judgment of, judgment will be consumed to enhance the power. The Channel Divinity mechanic will also consume these judgment stacks, and this will increase the divinity meter once again. The last part is a great way to keep your divinity up. So let's see this a little bit in combat. So this at will is increasing burning stacks, and once I use a burning at will, it will do a lot of damage and it will give you radiant stacks. But as long as you use radiant stacks of radiant powers, this is also radiant, you will get radiant stuff and you will not consume it. And when you use the other at wills, you will get burning stacks. If you use your tab mechanic now, you will see that you gain a lot of divinity and you will lose your judgment stacks. And as I said, this is a great way to keep this bar filled, because you want to have as much as possible in here so you can spam your strong powers. Let's do a little bit more fighting. We are on the DPS. What I like to do is start off with some at wills, generate some stacks, and then just kill them right out with a searing javelin, I think it's called. And when we get the radiant stacks, make sure to consume it. And as you can see, I do quite a bit of damage on this cleric build. But as you can also see, divinity is used up quite quickly. So make sure it will also regenerate by itself, by the way, out of combat. So that is the Cleric class. Let's go to the next one. Next up is the Paladin. Paladins are heavily armored fighters with typically a lot of health. Paladins are the only class without an explicit damage dealing rule. That doesn't mean they don't do damage though. They can. There are two paragons once again. Just like of every class, we have two paragons. We have the Oathkeeper, which is the healer paragon. You can also see that by the icon, by the way. And we have the Justicar paragon, which is the tank role. As for the mechanics, because we have different roles, the mechanics are very different once again. We start off with the Justicar. Justicar, as a shift class mechanic, has, and this one we've seen before, block. This is exactly the same as the Barbarian Sentinel. With block, we hold up our shields. Oh wait, that's tap. Oops. So we hold up our shield and we will guard our health, basically. So we can go to an enemy, and if they hit us, we will not lose HP. Okay, it missed. We will not lose HP, but instead we lose stamina here. This is once again a stamina meter. It will not recharge as long as we hold up our shield, but if we let go of our shield, we will get back our health. And this way we can tank a lot of damage without dying. Alright, now we have the tap class mechanic. Tap class mechanic is called Divine Champion. Divine Champion is a toggle which, when enabled, doubles the effectiveness of your class feature auras. So there are a couple of auras here: Protection, Wrath, Aura of Vengeance. And these auras have a certain effect. Enabling Divine Champion, which looks like this, will double the effect of those auras. It will, however, slowly drain your divinity while in this stance. You can also disable it again by pressing tab again. There are three other mechanics for the Justicar Paladin. The first one is Oath of Protection, which we've seen before on the Barbarian Sentinel again, which gives you more hit points, you attract the enemies more, and you also decrease your damage output by 10%. Each tank has this mechanic. Then we have Justicar's Charge. Justicar's Charge says that we restore divinity while blocking attacks. So if we hold up our block mechanic and the enemy hits us, we get divinity. This is our main way of getting divinity as a tank, because we want to get hit. This is the main reason why we want to get hit, to get more divinity. And the last class mechanic as a Justicar, and we saw it before already, you use that while you have Divine Champion active. So first we have to activate Divine Champion, and in this case, if we press the block key, we don't block anymore, we use Divine Palisade. This is basically an upgraded version of block. Next to blocking the enemy's attack in this mode and having control immunity, you will also heal allies who are standing behind you. So this is a great way to save your team, make sure they're okay, and protect them. So let's get rid of this enemy now. By the way, as with most classes, also out of combat, both meters will automatically recharge. So that was the tank, the Justicar Paragon. Let's go to the Oathkeeper. The Oathkeeper has different class mechanics. The shift class mechanic is also block, by the way. It's the same as the Justicar version. The tab class mechanic is a little bit different, by the way. This is the same as the Cleric. So this is Channel Divinity, and this will slowly refill this yellow bar, which will make it possible for you to use your encounter powers more often. The last class mechanic for a Oathkeeper Paladin is Oath of Devotion, and this is basically making you a better healer again, and it also adds a shield on allies that you heal. So it's just making you a great healer. Next up is the Rogue. Rogues are nimble fighters that turn invisible in combat, or out of combat, by the way. There are two paragons again for a Rogue. They're both damage dealers. We have the Whisper Knife, which is DPS, but specialized at killing groups of enemies. And we have the Assassin, which is also DPS paragon or DPS role, and this specializes at taking down single targets. As these paragons are both damage, the mechanics for both are often the same, and in this case they are the same. For the shift mechanic we have another displacement mechanic. It's called roll, and roll moves you a moderate amount of distance for a moderate amount of stamina. Basically the same as the ones we've seen before. Displacements, it's all kind of equal but not completely. The tab class mechanic is your stealth. If you press tab, let's get over a mount, we will go invisible and enemies will not be able to see us. This is our stealth meter. It will slowly drain while you're stealth, so you will not be able to be in stealth indefinitely, just for a short time, and when you're not stealthed it will slowly fill again, and when it's blue you'll be able to stealth once again. The last class mechanic is called Quick Reflexes, and Quick Reflexes is a little bit of a weird one. It says you have an additional 25% deflect severity, but deflect severity is not really shown anymore on the character sheet, and there are no other sources of it, so I don't really know if it works. Anyway, we are on the assassin role, so let's go fight a bit. Typically what you want to do in stealth, this is by the way important. If you are invisible you will get combat advantage, and this will make sure that you do more damage. Also some skills will have increased effects, increased damage, or additional effects if you are in stealth mode. For example, here you see at the bottom stealth, the radius is increased, stealth 50% critical severity to the attack, stealth twice, pulses twice as fast, half the duration, whatever. There are additional effects once you're stealthed. Typically you want to go in stealth, use your smoke bomb, and then you quickly dispatch of the enemies. I don't think I'm in a full build, so it takes a little bit longer to kill these guys, but it's okay. Anyway, this is how the rogue fights. So go in stealth, use the special bonus, make sure you get the first hit off to the enemy, and then make sure to finish them off quickly. Let's go to the next class. The next class is the Fighter. The Fighter class is another heavily armored class, which actually can also dish out quite some damage based on which paragon you're using once again. There are two paragons for the Fighter. We have the Vanguard, which as you can see is a tank role, and we have the Dreadnought, which is a DPS role. The Dreadnought has separate class mechanics from the Vanguard, because once again they're different roles, so often they have different mechanics. As a Dreadnought we are mostly focused on damage dealing, but our shift mechanic is actually just block. And block once again, as before, it uses stamina to block incoming damage. This is nothing new. We've seen this a couple times already. Mod 16 has brought classes closer together, and this is one thing where you can really see that. So block, I don't have to demonstrate this again. We use our shield to block incoming damage. One difference, by the way, and this is why I do have to demonstrate this, the fighter is the only class that actually can attack in this mode. The fighter gets 2 distinct attacks while blocking one or two different at wills, and this is what we cannot use encounter powers or daily powers while blocking, but we can use our special powers that are matched with dodge. So there's the difference. The tap mechanic for the Vanguard is called Seethe. Seethe is another block mechanic, but while using Seethe you cannot attack. So here we have aggro again. Use Seethe. While in Seethe mode we drain our stamina quite quickly, but we also gain a lot of Vengeance quite quickly. And Vengeance is the next class mechanic that I'm going to tell you about. It's very important as well. Alright, so the next one is Vengeance. Vengeance is increased by using either Seethe or blocking incoming attacks, and if the meter is above 50%, which is here, you deal quite a bit more damage, so a significant amount. So it's very worth it to make sure that your meter before you start attacking is at a high level. Actually, not just blocking attacks will increase your meter, also attacking will make sure that the meter stays full. If you totally do not have any Vengeance, make sure to use Seethe to quickly raise your Vengeance meter. So that was the Dreadnought. Next up is the Vanguard. Let me swap real quick, which we can do at a campfire. As a Vanguard, we, as a shift mechanic, once again have the block. It's exactly the same as before. Once again, as a Paladin, as a fighter, we can still attack in this mode. And a difference is that we do not have a Vengeance meter, so we are not recharging Vengeance while as a Vanguard Paragon. There is no Vengeance. The tap class mechanic is called Dig In. It looks a little bit like Seethe, but this is basically another block, but with a bigger shield, and enemies cannot have combat advantage. Also, as you can see, you regenerate stamina while dug in. One more thing, if you block an attack and you immediately release we are under the control effect. Okay, we dig in. If we get attacked and we release, dig in immediately after we get attacked. You saw that we flashed red for a bit there. And this is the Retaliate class mechanic, which is another class mechanic. Retaliate, and this we can see, is this one. As you can see, when we release Dig In immediately after blocking an attack, you will trigger Retaliate, and Retaliate will basically do damage to the enemy. So you can do damage without even attacking. You just have to use Dig In and release Dig In right after you get hit. The last class mechanic of this Vanguard is one that we've seen a couple times already. It's called Path of the Vanguard, so it has a new name. But as with all tanks, we get 40% more hit points. We attract enemies more, which we want as a tank. And we also decrease our damage by 10%. Let's see, we're in the tank paragon. Actually, we already showed some of the fighting, so let's not demonstrate more of that. Let's go to the next class. The next class is the Wizard. The Wizard is a damage dealer who uses spells to take down enemies. Wizards are a bit complex because they have a ton of class mechanics, but I will try to dumb them down to an understandable level. The Wizard has 2 paragons, no surprise there. We have the Arcanist, which specializes single target. It's a damage dealer role, and the Thaumaturge, which is more area of effect damage, also damage dealer role. So we have 2 damage dealer roles, and as often when we have 2 times the same role, a lot of the class mechanics are actually shared. The first class mechanic is one that we've seen a couple of times already, the Shift mechanic. Shift is called Teleport for the Wizard, and it's another displacement again, which moves you actually quite a large distance. I think it's the largest distance of all of the displacement mechanics, but it also costs quite a bit of stamina. As you can see, almost a quarter of your stamina. Then the Tap class mechanic is not really a... well, it is a mechanic. So Tap is called Spell Mastery, and Spell Mastery allows you to slot a 4th encounter power with additional damage and effects into your tap slot. So instead of having something fixed here, we can actually move a power in here, and this power will have an additional effect. You can see it at the bottom under Spell Mastery. For this spell, for example, this encounter power, it says Spell Mastery now affects multiple targets with 160 magnitude damage. As you can see, not all skills have explicit Spell Mastery effects, but Spell Mastery will always increase the damage of the spell. So now we get to the other class mechanics, and as I said, there are quite a few. We have 3 more shared class mechanics, which is Control Mastery, Arcane Mastery, and Chill. Control Mastery says that control effects against non-player characters are 2.5 times more effective, so they last 2.5 times longer. So as a wizard, you can control enemies for quite a while, and your other mechanics actually help with that. Next up is Arcane Mastery. Arcane Mastery means that your spells give stacks of Arcane Mastery, and the more spells, the more stacks of Arcane Mastery you have, the more damage you do, and these stacks also enhance other powers, which can in turn consume these stacks. So it's all more damage, and this means you have to use your powers in a certain rotation typically. The last shared class mechanic is called Chill, and Chill is something that we also have seen before. Chill means that your cold-based spells, and we have a lot of cold-based spells on the wizard, they slow enemies, and sometimes they even freeze enemies. So we have here some fire archons. It's interesting to freeze them, of course, but as you can see, we're cooling them down. This is a fire-based spell. Okay, I don't think I'm using the right spells to show this, but you can actually also freeze enemies with different spells. The Arcanist has exactly the same class mechanics as the Thaumaturge, at least these 5. The last one, which is unique for the Thaumaturge, is called Smolder. And Smolder basically means that your fire-based spells, so we have ice-based spells and we have fire-based spells. Fire-based spells will basically set enemies on fire. It will add damage over time on the enemies, and if the enemy is affected by chill and then by smolder, then ice spells can also refresh it. It's as I said, it's a little bit complicated and it's not necessary to know the intrinsic details, but you have fire and ice spells on the wizards, which adds status effects to the enemies. So that's the wizard, throwing a lot of spells, throwing status effects on enemies, freezing them, setting them ablaze. You can really burn down enemies really quickly with wizards. They're in a pretty good spot actually. So let's go to the last one. The last class for this video is the Warlock. The Warlock can either be a damage dealer aided by a soul puppet, or a healer that leeches health of his enemies and gives his health in return to his allies. It's a very unique way of healing your allies, but the Warlock, as you can imagine, has two paragons, and one is a healer, which is called Soul Weaver, and the other one is a damage dealer, which is called Hellbringer. The Warlock actually has a lot of common mechanics. Only the tab class mechanic is not common. For the common mechanics, the shift class mechanic is called Shadow Slip, and this is not changed from before. It basically means that you move very quickly, a little bit like the Barbarian, like Sprint in the Blade Master Paragon. You move quickly and you use up your stamina pretty quickly while going quickly. That's basically what it is. The first additional class mechanic is called Soul Spark. Soul Spark basically means that many of your powers grant you a Soul Spark, and you can see them here. I have 6 Soul Sparks now, and when you get one you will add up this meter, and when you have 6 you will get one more dot. You have 5 dots and 6 of these bars, so in total you can have a maximum of 30 Soul Sparks. Having Soul Sparks increases your damage. So as you can see here, if I start hitting this thing, I get Soul Sparks. You can see the meter here is filling up. And the fuller it is, the more damage I do. Now I have maximum damage. You also have some skills that actually consume Soul Sparks in exchange for doing more damage, like the tap mechanic, which I will get to in a moment. Let's kill this thing. I think I'm in a... Am I on a healing? No, I'm on the damage dealing paragon. This character is not strong. So that's Soul Spark. It's basically this bar, and if you are out of combat, Soul Sparks are consumed. If you have more than 1 dot here, they are consumed and give you health. If you have less than 1 dot, if you have used them up, then you will go back to 1 dot. That's basically your base setting. The next class mechanic that's shared between the paragons is Lesser Curse, and Lesser Curse, it's very basic, and most of your powers apply a damage over time to the enemies that are hit. So if you hit an enemy, it could be that that enemy gets Lesser Curse and they will get some damage over time. Wow. And the last one is a little bit more interesting, and that's this guy here, the Soul Puppet. And it's also called Soul Puppet, the class mechanic. Some of your powers can summon a Soul Puppet, which fights alongside you. You can only have one at a time, and they disappear after 20 seconds. Now you can ask, why is this one still here? I will get to that in a second. Summoning a Soul Puppet when you already have a Soul Puppet active refreshes the active one, so the duration of 20 seconds is reset, and it also goes back to full life. Refreshing a soul puppet in this way also makes it do more damage, because this guy also will fight and do damage to enemies. As a Hellbringer, which I am right now, there is a feat which is called Soul Desecration, I think is here, which says that soul puppets do not disappear anymore, and that's why this one stays here. As the tap class mechanic, and you've seen me use it for a bit already, it's called Soul Scorch, and Soul Scorch expends these here, the soul sparks, to do some damage. And you do more damage the more soul sparks you have, and also you will use more the more you have. So if I use soul spark here, you see I lose a couple of those sparks, and once I'm out of combat I regenerate health again. So that's the Hellbringer. If we go to the Soul Weaver, Soul Weaver has a different tap mechanic because that's a healer and not a damage dealer. So let's go to Soul Weaver. This one is totally not built, so apologies for the slow combat. As you can see, my soul stacks are full. As a Soul Weaver, you can see with my tap mechanic, I slowly drain enemies while healing myself. So you can see the green numbers popping up. I am getting my health back basically. So they are not really doing any damage to me. Well, they are doing damage, but I'm healing it back up immediately. Oh, I'm not using the blood buff here, that's why. So this is basically what this does. And as the healer, you then can give your health to your allies. Summon another summon as well. So that was the Warlock. You've seen the combat basics. I hope this video was helpful. If anything I said was incorrect, it's a long video, so I probably said something that's not correct or might be explained better in a different way. Let me know in the comments and I can answer your comment, and I can also learn. If you have any remarks on this video or any suggestions on what to investigate next, feel free to leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.